Welcome, ducklings. First ever Butorac books review. Such a privilege for you. You must be so excited. First ever book, one of my all-time favorites, Black Swan Green by David Mitchell. Book was written in 2007. Takes place in the early 80s in Worcester, England. It's about a young boy named Jason Taylor. He's, I think, 12 or 13. It's a coming-of-age novel, and it's all about his town. The town is called Black Swan Green, but it's really about his neighborhood, the way he grows up in the neighborhood and what he deals with. There's a lot of interesting stuff that goes on. I don't want to spoil it, but it's sort of his day-to-day routine, one chapter for each month. But what makes it interesting is less the plot and more the characters and some of the devices. So in the novel, Jason Taylor is young. He's sort of sensitive, naive. He's from a nice upper middle class family in the suburbs. And he has a stammer, which is not a stutter. It's different than a stutter, which I found out from this novel, which was interesting. But he has a stammer. And the way he's growing up is he is from the nice part of town. So he's kind of got a target on his back. He's a nice kid from the nice part of town. And there are a lot of bullies. There are a lot of tough kids in the neighborhood. And he tries to grow up and fit in with them, and it's difficult. The reason I think I like this one so much is because it reminds me the most about the way I grew up. Now, obviously, I grew up a little bit later. I was growing up. I was 12 in 92, okay, but I grew up in a big neighborhood with a lot of kids. There's a lot of crazy stuff that happened. There were bullies and fights. There were games. There was all kinds of wild stuff that went on. Kind of typical, actually, but when it's really explained and when you really get to hear a young boy's inner monologue about what's going on around him, that's what makes it so fascinating. How he thinks about his place in the social world and his social status, and how he calculates trying to be cool and trying to fit in. It's first person, narrated by Jason, inner monologue. He's constantly dealing with bullies and fights, and I think if you grew up, if you're a man or boys and you grew up, you'll recognize this. You'll recognize these interactions. The slang is very different because it's 80s British, but it resonates. There's a lot of stuff that sort of boys say that sort of translates, that sort of works across different timelines and across different countries. So this novel really illustrates, I think, what it's like to grow up as a middle-class boy and trying to find your place in society. It's really, really powerful. The inner monologues, I think, are brilliant. David Mitchell's a spectacular writer, and he really brings you into the mind of Jason Taylor. You really feel for Jason as he has to deal with the bullies and with the with all the difficulties. His home life is idyllic from the outside, but very sort of dark and sad from the inside. He narrates it to us, but as a young 12-year-old boy, he doesn't understand what's going on. So you get that you sense that naivete where you really feel for him because you see what's going on as an adult, and he describes it to you and he doesn't see it. So it's really powerful in a lot of those ways. Some of the plot lines are pretty dramatic. There's a big fist fight that happens sort of out in the woods, and if you grew up in suburbia, you've probably either been in one or seen one. So that really resonated with me. He's off on his own, romping through the woods. They play a really dangerous game on a frozen lake where they basically try to tackle each other and pin each other to the ground. And I can remember doing things like that. So it's a coming of age story about a young boy, and I think it people talk about it like a Catcher in the Rye, or maybe the absolutely true history of a part-time Indian, but I think it's a lot different than those. I think it's better personally. Catcher in the Rye is great, but it's a little dated, and Holden's maybe a little whiny, and the absolutely true I said history, maybe it's diary, I can never remember. But, that's a great story, but that's really dramatic. It's a little over the top for some readers. But this is a story that I think really, really tells the truth without trying to do too much. It just tells the story of what it's like to grow up a certain way. Again, that sort of middle class boyhood, being out in the neighborhood, running around, seeing things that you're not ready to see, experiencing things, getting in fights, playing sports, meeting girls, it's all in there. And so, if it's not a market or not a demographic that's widely talked about, other than in condescending viral commercials. But it really tells the truth that is not told very often. So I really, really enjoyed it. This is the part of the review where I'm supposed to say if I liked it or didn't like it. Obviously, I liked it. So I'm not going to spend much time there. But with regards to the recommendation, do I recommend this book? Short answer, obviously I do. Long answer is that it's a challenge. David Mitchell is... I hate to use this word, but I'm an English teacher, so I'm going to. He's prolific. He's a prolific writer. His voice is outstanding, but it's challenging. And it takes place in his multiverse. So some of the characters you see exist in other novels. For example, Hugo Lamb is Jason Taylor's cousin, and he comes over for a visit. Well, if you know who Hugo Lamb is from the Bone Clocks, well, that makes it interesting. And there's a few other Mitchell universe things that happen that make the book good for a David Mitchell reader. But it's not easy. I'm teaching it to my 11th graders right now, and I think it's going well, but I'm also using an audio book in class. So I'm gonna push them out of the nest soon, and we'll see how that goes. But would I recommend it? Yes, absolutely, with the caveat that it's challenging. Also, it's a question of, if you are the type of person who grew up sort of the way I grew up, again, if you're the sort of middle class boy that people think had this sort of perfect middle class suburban existence, but that's not the whole story. If you're that person, then this novel is going to hit you hard right from the beginning. The way the boys call each other names, how casually and easily they do it, how casually and easily they go from joking to wrestling to fighting to picking on, and then back to joking again. All of it is really resonant and really powerful. So I recommend it. Black Swan Green, fantastic read, fantastic novel by David Mitchell. Somewhat specific in terms of its audience, but if you're interested in it, check it out. Black Swan Green.